to our session today on the future of construction, technology adoption, and cyber risks. My name is Alexis Bradshaw, and I sit on the North American Construction and Infrastructure team at Marsh, which is a global insurance brokerage. Very excited to join you all today for this topic. At Marsh, we are certainly big believers that technology adoption is unequivocally changing the face of the construction industry. However, with this great opportunity also comes some new risks. And today we want to take a look at some of these cyber concerns that have been emerging as the construction industry continues to develop these new technologies. So to start, I just wanted to kind of share some recent headlines that we've been seeing to affirm that the cyber attacks are occurring across industries, not just for construction. Bloomberg, recently reported this summer that around the world, companies were experiencing more cyber attacks just in the second half of the year alone. Security Magazine recently reported that 2,200 attacks occur every day. And Zurich performed their annual cyber risk survey and concluded that, businesses are sharpening their focus on cybersecurity, but also revealed much more room for improvement in building cyber resilience. So I wanted to start off by taking a look at the evolution of cyber risks for construction. The conversation has really evolved a lot in the last couple of years. Previously, cyber risk discussions were mainly focused on data breaches and privacy laws, with contractors not taking credit card information regularly or doing things of that nature. It didn't feel like the biggest concern, but in the last couple of years, cyber risks have certainly been expanding into areas that are much more directly relevant to contractors and the construction industry. So listed 3 points out here that I think are kind of key to focus on. The first being the interconnectedness to vendors and supply chains. This is regularly increasing for almost every contractor and also increasing your exposure to a cyber event. Financial risk. This has become quite a big exposure for construction firms. And what we're referring to here is really anytime you're moving capital around between parties and there's a chance for manipulation of invoices or sending money to where it doesn't belong. And lastly, sort of tied to the first focus on privacy laws and data breaches is the expansion and complexity of these laws. So it can be very important to pay attention, especially to where you're doing business. Certain states have introduced statutes that impose greater liability for failing to meet security standards. So not only might you be suffering from an actual cyber breach, but now there may be regulatory consequences for not having had certain standards in place to begin with. In other states, attorneys generals can review how a company collects and holds various information and data. And I think this reminds me of a recent incident where a contractor just sort of happened to be keeping 25 years of employee records. So anyone who had worked for them in the last 25 years, they had data on. And after they experienced a cyber breach, they were now liable to follow up with every employee that they kept this data on for the last 25 years and to provide credit monitoring for them all. So just taking a review of the types of data you are storing and why could be important, especially amidst new regulatory requirements. So the transition to digital construction, the main reason we are seeing this increase in cyber concerns is because there has been a robust transition to digital in the construction industry. One of the main reasons is because technology has the ability to reduce plenty of other construction risks. AXA XL is a big insurance carrier in the construction industry, and their head of construction innovation recently stated that interest in new technology, especially to reduce risks and boost productivity, is picking up throughout the construction industry. And they identified 4 areas where they're really seeing this uptick. The first being enterprise software. So this is going to be your BIM, your building information modeling, your data analytics, scheduling, bidding, estimating software, subcontractor pre-qual software, in field management tools. So this may be utilizing prefabrication or offsite construction techniques, using robotics, quality management, project management tools, telemedicine, supply chain management, Internet of Things, sensors. I think we're seeing one of the most useful, especially from an insurance perspective, are fleet telematics, Also from an insurance perspective, a pretty useful tool we're seeing deployed more regularly are water mitigation sensors, for your property policy. And then wearables, I think we are starting to see a bit of an uptick, at least in, some smart helmets and even things like that. And lastly, they identified reality capture as being a big area where they're seeing technology being deployed. This is going to, capture your drones, your laser scanners, any augmented reality, virtual reality, or digital twin type of tools. So as we've just discussed, we are seeing an increase in technological advances in construction. This is mainly because these tools, some of which are additionally outlined on the right-hand side of this slide, are providing contractors with real benefits and advantages. I think especially around safety and productivity, we're seeing some real positive results from using various technologies. Some technologies are actually helping to meet sustainability goals on projects or for companies as a whole. Certain technologies help to promote real collaboration, especially if you have remote, stakeholders. Use of cloud technology has been steadily increasing by contractors, particularly because it will allow you to provide, owners and project investors access to data sort of anytime, anywhere, in real time. Contractors are also using tech to help automate a lot of, time-consuming and repetitive tasks to produce real operational efficiencies in their organizations. So for all these reasons and more, it seems clear that for now, at least, the construction industry will only continue to increase their use of various technologies in order to remain competitive. So with this increase in opportunity from technology, however, does come an increase in risks, mainly cyber risks. So on this slide, we are showing you some data from a 2017-2018 Kroll report. On the left hand is a diagram depicting the root causes of sort of all US cyber incidents across any industry. And on the right hand side, we have survey results that were comparing the construction, engineering, and infrastructure sector to a global average. And the main takeaway being that cyber criminals do now see construction as a ripe industry for phishing and social engineering events in particular. Additionally, the ongoing digitization of infrastructure assets themselves has created an increased risk for cyber attacks. One of the contributors to that report from Kroll had sort of noted that, quote unquote, the bad guys have been looking at infrastructure, whether it's water, power distribution, sewage plants, or traffic lights, for quite some time, and are, doing so with increasing success. Ransomware attacks in particular are at an all-time high for infrastructure. Some reports are stating that 75% of all recorded critical infrastructure ransomware attacks since 2013 have occurred in just the last 2.5 years. So, as a result of, this reality, there are fears about service reliability for infrastructure assets, and the security of personal data is becoming a chief concern from users, governments, and investors. So, as a result, contractors and operators really do need to think about, responding to these concerns by aligning their, internal policies, employee practices, and supply chain procedures to ensure that there are no weak links that can be easily exploited. Was recently with some insurance carriers who write a lot of cyber coverage, and they had some data showing that on average, when a contractor was suffering from a cyber attack, they were down for 23 days, which is obviously quite costly to a business, and especially to delivering projects on time and on budget. So now that we recognize that there are risks being presented by these new technologies, I thought the idea of just covering what you might want to review in a cyber risk management framework for your company could be helpful. Sort of three big questions to address. And one, are you cyber resilient? Do you have any tools in place? And do you know the real cost to your organization from an event? Depending on the type of event, how exposed may you be, how long may you be down? And are you optimizing your cyber risk investment? So, spending money as wisely as possible. These are, the types of questions I think every contractor who's using these new technologies especially should be asking themselves. And, if you're looking for even just a place to start, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST for short, does keep a database of common vulnerabilities and exposures that contractors can reference to sort of start to help prioritize maybe where you want to make these investments in your cybersecurity. So, it's just important to think through all aspects of your business that could be interrupted. What is your data restoration process, or what should it be? What third-party exposures do you have? And, lastly, on the topic of, creating a cyber, framework for risk management, I think that the importance of a general culture of awareness cannot be understated. As contractors, similar idea to having, a real safety culture and the value that that provides and the cost savings that that can provide. I think it's a very similar concept here for a real culture of awareness. And just continuing on, as you're, performing your cyber, risk assessments, I think it's important to keep in mind that as contractors in this industry, you really have two key exposures. The first is your general, company exposure. So this is the client, employee, subcontractor data that you are retaining in various systems and softwares. And then also risk specific to a project site and materials. So this, is actually talking to, site access, controlling equipment, or other things that could become concerning. And on the right-hand side, equally important to consider is that no matter, the type of breach you may have, whether at the company level or project level, the results can be, either physical, such as material damage, bodily injury type of consequences, or non-physical, where the consequences are mostly in the form of economic damages. But as you and your team, review cyber incident and response planning, you need to try and account for these various scenarios and damages. So with that, I thought it might be helpful to consider cyber risk in your more traditional construction insurance products. As cyber has become a bigger risk on its own, our traditional, contractors policies that, you would buy for your organization or for your project have been, steadily increasing the cyber exclusions that are affirmative. And so wanted to take a minute here to look at a few of the key ones you may be more familiar with buying. One being your builder's risk, which is material damage to the contract works. Policy will, generally provide for loss from direct physical damage to covered property. But the questions you have to start to ask are, is data deemed tangible property? Is corruption of data deemed damage? Coverage is not going to be available for damage caused by hackers or employees who maliciously shut down a website or computer system. So overall, usually rather limited, claims and response scenarios out of your builder's risk or property type of coverage. For third-party general liability policies, they typically don't respond to any damages to intangible property, but would respond to bodily injury and property damage claims. However, these policies now pretty safely always have data and technology exclusions. So if the cause of that bodily injury or property damage is from an actual cyber event, you're going to be probably very hard pressed to get any coverage out of that policy. Professional indemnity or professional liability. Under these policies, your liability really needs to be arising from a breach of professional duties. It would really not likely respond to any cyber intrusion and the resulting losses or damages. Crime, there is some interesting part of the crime policy that could be very relevant. Coverage is generally limited to theft of assets, but often there can be coverage for fraudulent electronic fund transfers, which can be quite a big cyber exposure. However, the amount recoverable is often sublimited, to not a huge limit. And so important to consider how much, you're actually getting. But you can also sometimes use a crime coverage to capture the cost of recollecting, replicating, or restoring lost or corrupted data. So could be some nuances to look into from the crime policy. Lastly, I wanted to end with cyber insurance coverage, just to take a look at what you should be typically getting out of your cyber insurance policy. This is generally, they're very bespoke policies, so it kind of can change from carrier to carrier. However, typically you have two parts, first party coverage for data breach response, data restoration, network business interruption, and cyber extortion, and third party coverage for privacy liability, network security liability, privacy, regulatory defense costs, and media liability, which is probably not big here. And with that, I think I am at time, but I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. Please reach out with any questions. The cyber insurance market is not an easy one. I'd be remiss to not mention that, but the more you can do in terms of your own framework and building up your security protocols, the better poised you will be to also secure some reasonably priced cyber coverage from the insurance market. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your conference.